Yeah, I don't even know if that was deleted.
Some of those were some really good ones, I have to say. There's some funny ones for sure.
Was there any like basis to this? Like, was there any like times where there was issues within the team with Selfmade, or like how did the Fnatic thing really happen? Because I mean, we've heard multiple different things, and it's just like you kind of have to read between the lines. I mean, Sam Matthews came out and said something. It was like about his contract expiring, and like if his contract's expiring in 6 months, then maybe like the management needed to force it. So like, what can you actually say on this topic?
Well, I think I'm not the one to ever share like stories from any team ever. I think always fans run away with the lack of context, and the context is like thousands of hours that we've spent together, right? And there's been moments of weakness for everyone, throughout Spring Split. Same thing for Selfmade. He has had moments of weakness, I think in terms of performance. I think like the biggest issue we had, honestly, was, coming into Spring, everyone had similar expectations to what the situation was the previous year. And I had this built-up expectation in my mind of how it would be to join Fnatic, because in my mind, if you're competing in Europe, at some point you see yourself in either G2 or Fnatic, and, that's how you want to, compete for the titles. So in my mind, they also set my expectations wrong, because I'm joining a team. Bwipo has beaten me in the best of 5. Upset has beaten me in best of 5. Nisqy has beaten me in best of 5. I'm like, okay, this is a place where I'm going to learn some new things. And I think the same thing for Bwipo, Selfmade, and Hilly. They came from, they've been were in Fnatic for a year straight, and then they came into the next year assuming things are going to be similar, But the moment you switch out 2 players, you bring in Nisqy, Upset, the coach, you bring in Tolki, the situation is completely different. And some of the things that they had going on in the previous year, they took for granted that they're going to happen again, and the dynamic was completely different and completely new. And I think in terms of performance, it would be ridiculous, to only put that on Selfmade. I think everyone can learn super much from Spring, and in my mind, I had this image of what we would do different if we continue with the same roster coming into summer. In no shape or form is like, yeah, Selfmade is Judas. He burns everything down. No, it's like we all had moments of weakness. We all had things to learn. I feel I hold myself responsible for Spring and the failures of Spring, because bombing out against Schalke like that is a disaster if you look at just the headline. But in theory, for me, it's just a big experience, and I think it was the same for the other guys, And in the end, I know for myself that I am not the same person I am, that I was a couple of months ago, because I want to find myself constantly growing. And I think this off-season was one of those off seasons where we're growing a lot. And that's why it might be confusing, because Bwipo did the crackdown that you mentioned, right? And, he was very vocal about things. And, that's one of the mistakes he did back then, I think. And, always when you throw things out there, you leave out that context. They worked together 1 year straight. They've been through, ups and downs, and they've seen all sides of each one of them, the worst sides, the best sides. And if you just throw something out there, people run away with it and, create narratives, because people are addicted to it. Anything that is, juicy in terms of drama, you kind of want to, share with your friends, talk about it, and make up your own story. And I think between these splits, I wanted to make sure that we create a culture where, we don't, we are committed to each other. We make a commitment to each other, and no matter who is next to you, this is who you're committing to. And I think throughout this off season, with everything that's going on, everyone was ready to commit to whoever they play with. And I think that's why this whole LEC Wooloo statement coming out goes against what we believed in, what we saw, and what we felt about each other at that time. Maybe there was, in Spring, there were moments when we argued. There were moments where tables were slammed. I remember myself, I was slamming the table, happened. And maybe, that little story of what occurred, maybe that seeps out somewhere. Someone tells a person that doesn't need to be told, and they make the whole picture out of it,
Yeah, because Yamato's a violent coach then. That's what that must mean, right? That's how it starts.
Exactly, right? It's bringing the LCK courts and all that jazz. No.
Let me ask you this way, though. I'll put it this way. When I've spoken previously about Selfmade and some of his issues in Fnatic, that was basically not from your era. It was from last year, when he was with the Mythy team and when Rekkles was still there, etc. And as you alluded to, Bwipo's infamous, now deleted, crackdown was during the off season. So this is again way before you arrived. It was a different team. like, even though I certainly hadn't heard any of those things about this particular lineup of Fnatic, one area I do want to ask about though is like, look, that what was reported there, as far as I can tell, isn't the case. Like, they basically just straight up said, like, you guys basically like demanded he be kicked out of the team because he would, you know, argue with you or some bullshit. One thing I will say though is, as people who can remember now the VOD with Bwipo clearly doesn't really on like an attitude level seem to fuck with Selfmade. They seem like very different people. Like, Bwipo seems like someone who's more of like let's find solutions, work through things and talk through things. Whereas I have to say, if I've heard from some of Selfmade's teammates, like, he can be very, very hard. Like, he has a set way that he thinks you should play the game. Sometimes this might sound like a weird side thing to throw in, but he almost had a little bit of a Forgiven vibe to me of like, his way that he sometimes is annoyed at teammates is like, he just expects you to know what you're supposed to do. It's more like he doesn't want to like have to like communicate on some detail if he thinks like it doesn't involve the jungler, for example. Like, you know, you just do whatever you're doing and I shouldn't have to, which is why I contrast it with Forgiven, because it's a very unusual sort of complaint, you know. Now, when I say all of this, right, even if it wasn't the case that there was any big fight or that that's, you know, maybe the business reasons make perfect sense, would you not also agree, from the outside at least, in the things I'd heard, it does sound like Selfmade wasn't a great sort of culture fit for whatever this group in Fnatic is? It does seem like you were going in different directions. Would you agree?
I think definitely there were moments during spring where we like were torn in different directions. I think that's, you know, for sure, you know, with the results, I think I can't deny it, right? I think if we culturally fit together and we had, you know, the level of players that we had in spring, you know, then there's no excuses, you know. We couldn't figure out together what we needed to do as a team. We couldn't figure out what our basics were, and we brushed off a lot of things. We took them for granted, pretty much. It's like, yeah, this is something that we should know. We don't need to concentrate on it. And then it's like, eventually I realized, you know, in week 6, week 7, I was like, yo, this is not going to work. You know, we are here. We're just kind of winging it. We're winning games where the games are super bloody, and we managed to get massive leads just because we're individually better. But this is not something that you can replicate, because our games never look the same in terms of how we won. If you look at the best teams all over the world, always the patterns, you can kind of see them. If you watch down one games, there's always the same patterns. And that to me is what the basics of the game are. But the fundamentals, the basics changes depending on the 5 players that you have, because there's many ways of playing the game. And for us, we missed that completely. And then when we were at the point where like we wanted to achieve something else, I had given, I believe, the players a little bit too much freedom to go in their own direction. So by the time week 7, 6 came around, I got hit with COVID. I was knocked out for 2 weeks, and then it was just 5 weeks of someone being sick because we kind of just rotated it around, which was super silly and very, very stupid. And then by the time we were playing, like preparing for playoffs, 1 week, 2 week, those scrims were pretty good. Like, we were taking a big shit on G2, we were stomping them, but it turned out that didn't really, you know, it was just a fake confidence boost, because it turned out that they weren't that good either. It was just, you know, we tried to figure it out. I gave the players a little bit too much freedom, and they kind of walked into their direction. Because in my mind at the beginning, I was like, oh, these are players that have beaten me. Let's see, you know, let's recreate what made them so good in the past. And it was just too difficult to achieve, and too much responsibility for everyone to kind of, you know, figure themselves out, because we needed a lot more support for each other, and we needed to, you know, be aligned on what the culture should be. So on my end, the hard work that I put in between spring and summer was making sure that we align on, you know, what we want the team to be. And, you know, regardless of what the roster would be, I think we managed to achieve that in the conversations that we had together between, you know, spring and summer, because there was a shit ton of time because we lost to Schalke. We had 2
By the way,
months.
I've just got a quick follow-up from Dom. Along those lines, it actually sounds like what you're saying. It's quite an interesting sort of philosophical discussion we could have, because it sounds like you're saying, as a coach, you did something similar to what Rekkles himself says he thinks his problem in G2 was, which is after he lost in G2, he effectively said, because they were the ones always beating him, he came in thinking sort of like, well, you know, what do I know? I can't tell them what to do.
Don't fuck it up.
Yeah, they have the formula, as it were, so I'll just let it play out. It sounds like as a coach, you did something similar, because you thought of these brilliant players that have beaten your teams. You kind of thought, like, let me just let them go with it. Whereas, I mean, in this case, if you look back now, you'd have rather maybe had like one game plan for everyone and brought them into your vision, right?
Yes. You know, I believe in strengthening the collective, like, problem solving of the 5. I believe in strengthening the emotional problem solving of the 5. I believe in meditation. I have a strong idea of how I believe things should be run, but I leave room for freedom because this is where I believe, players get to express themselves, and a good balance between that. And when I saw that statement by Rekkles, it resonated with me too, because I had a very similar experience. Like, I think my expectations were just built very, very wrong, because in my mind, there was this point in time, I believe, like in season 2, season 1, I was duo queuing and playing with Shushi and expected a lot, and there was conversations about me potentially joining Fnatic. Nothing too extreme, but for a guy that's 15 years old, I'm going to use that to fuel my dream. And at the time, I was like, okay, I live at home, I can't leave because I need to finish school, so I'm just going to wait for my opportunity. So since that moment, I've built up for this moment in time when I joined Fnatic. And I realize now, I would realize week 6, week 7, I was like, I'm here because of who I am, and I need to bring that to the table. And by the time that happened, as I mentioned, we got really, really sick, and it was just much too late. And on my end, I realized as well, even though players individually can be better, the needs of the team and how you build a team in the end doesn't change, because no player is bigger than the team, right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would like to ask about is like what the vision for the team was, because a lot of people going into the season viewed Fnatic as a team that had like split identity, where half the team wanted to play super aggressively. It was like Bwipo Hilly always trying to go in, and then it was Rekkles Nemesis always calling to back out of fights. And the idea from the community was, if you remove those two players and you add Upset and Nisqy, and they have the right mindset of following up those engages, then Fnatic would be able to potentially like have a really strong aggressive identity. And it felt like there was always like this issue where no one was able to like hit the off button. People would just go in so hard that, so many games for Fnatic ended up just being inted. What would you say about like this identity, and like if players were able to fit into it? Was it that Rekkles and Nemesis not being there like was really missed by the players? Like there was no one to actually give like an other perspective on things, or like what did you think about the team identity that was created when Nisqy and Upset joined?
I think our biggest issue is that we lacked one completely. I think we won games when enemies just decided to, not respect what we're trying to achieve. Imagine you are playing with mid-prior, you're hovering, you're stacking a wave on bottom, you're going to crash it, you're going to threaten the dive with your mid-prior. And then our issue was, if the enemies weren't on the bot turret, we just didn't know what the fuck to do, because we're so used to just killing them there and then using that gold to get ultra fed, and then we just take whatever the fuck fight we can take. We just take every fight that we can because we are super, super strong. And there's a skill in that too, I've had players where it's very tough to teach. It's like, yo, you're stronger now, you should look to force, you should take your space, you should make it understood that you are the boss of the rift right now. I had the opposite issue. For us, it was the other issue where, we managed to win games where the enemy didn't respect it. We managed to get kills. That's why versus Schalke, at the moment, like they backed off the dive, you could see, I remember there was this moment where Selfmade is playing volleyball, we have mid-prio, enemy Corki is completely fucked, he has to base for the package, and then we go into bottom side, the enemy respects the dive, we're like, oh shit, what are we supposed to do now? We're diving the tower, but nobody's here, and then we just get caught between a rock and a hard place and we die. And I think the missing part for us was figuring out what our identity was. Because for me, there's the basics of the game, but then there is the basics of a team. It's like, what is the pattern that you follow to win games? And always when those conversations were brought up in the beginning, it's like, I brought us like, okay, guys, we need to figure this out. We need to figure out how we play around tempo. We need to play for tempo. We need to set some basic rules that we follow in the game. Then the response in the beginning was like, oh, this is easy. This is easy. We got this covered. And I'm like, okay, these guys, 5 games against top esports, they were at the world championship. They beat me in the past. Let's see where this goes, And we gave everyone a little bit too much freedom. And by the end, we're like, holy shit, this is not working. This is not working at all. So it was a lot of lessons in spring for all of us, for me in particular as well.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. So I guess the next thing that we should talk about is the whole Bwipo move. because this is surprising for a bunch of reasons. It's not necessarily from the angle that people don't believe that Bwipo can be a good jungler. It's more about the replacement of like Bwipo with Adam top lane, because Bwipo was one of the strongest top laners in LEC for a bunch of years, and I think a lot of the community was surprised that a guy like Adam got such a big opportunity so quickly. I mean, he's played one split of LFL, and then they win it, and immediately he's thrown into a top tier team. Normally you would expect a player like that to take like a year in ERL, or start off in a worse team. So like, what did you guys really see in Adam that made you guys want to put him directly into the LEC as a starting top laner?
Well, the idea for Fnatic is to make sure that they position themselves somewhat in a position of strength coming into the 2021 off season. Like in regards to Bwipo and Selfmade, they decided not to resign, and of course that's completely their decision. But Fnatic need to, of course, protect their interests for the future. And Adam had some good moments. I was watching his stream, and he is a player with potential, very young. It's a risk, of course. It's a risk. I'm not gonna tell you here 100% he's gonna be the best top lane ever, and it's gonna take some time to reach the pedigree of Bwipo, because Bwipo in his first year went to the World Finals, right? It's a very tough task for anyone. But the way we view Adam is, a long-term project. I think coming into summer, he has Bwipo next to him. He's going to learn a shit ton, which is, a gold mine. Like if I'm a rookie top laner and my jungler is fucking, one of the best top laners ever, I'm fucking happy. I'm really fucking happy, because he understands what I need better than I know it. And that's already, visible in scrims. Adam is a player, together with Upset, who is also signed for the long term. This is where Fnatic sees the future, And in regards to the question of Bwipo and Selfmade, I assume that question is going to come up, so I'm going to let you guys just ask it.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Like, we can jump into that right now. So there's the Bwipo and Selfmade change. I mean, the other question would be, before we get into that, like, what made you guys decide to get a new top laner instead of just trying to get a jungler that was suitable to what the players wanted? Because it seems like there's a lot of like decent junglers. I mean, even on Adam's team, like somebody like Synkrov has been pretty good for a while, right? So like, I don't know. Like, my question would mainly be, what made you guys decide to replace the top lane position instead of just getting a competent jungler?
So on my end, like if I look at players in terms of, it's not the right term to call it intangible value, because it's very tangible. Bwipo's level of knowledge and his relationship with the other teammates, and his overall sense of responsibility is something that any team would really cherish. Bwipo is a person that. If I look at his leadership qualities and his understanding of the game, like you could just watch his stream and you just watch him play a lane phase, and he's gonna throw more information than your mind can handle at you while you're watching his stream. Like, he's very talented in terms of seeking that knowledge. He viewed top lane not as top lane. He just saw the game for what the game is, and I think that's ideal for a jungle. And in my mind, when I look at our roster and how I want to create success in summer, there's going to be, we're going to need to take some risks. And Bwipo jungle is not an idea that just came out of nowhere, because, Bwipo role swapping has been an idea every offseason ever, because Bwipo is a problem solver. He wants to try to position his team to win. Like, he just wants to be what the team needs at any point in time. And for me, if I looked at any of these other junglers, I knew for the short term, it's just not gonna, have the same effect as putting Bwipo and Hilly-san closer together. The last time Bwipo role swapped, he went to AD carry and he played with Hilly, and that duo was one of the most lethal ones we've had in Europe. And with Bwipo's game knowledge and the proximity of jungle and support, like him playing top lane, it was pretty much Hilly and him. They were in a long distance relationship, He came in for a weekend because he had a week off, he came for a weekend, but all that time they're spending together, they're enjoying it, they get some kills, they get something done together. They know in the back of their mind that Bwipo needs to go back top. He needs to go back top and catch that wave. He's leading at some point in time, and I think with this level of proximity, with them playing much closer together, it's going to be much more fruitful, because I think that's something that was missing for us in spring. Hilly and Selfmade had a hard time agreeing when they needed to pressure, when they need to back off, and they were often not in sync of what they wanted to do. Both players had good ideas, but they were just different ideas, and they had a hard time figuring out what they wanted to do. I believe jungle and support drives how the game is supposed to be played, and Bwipo and Hilly have a very, very similar idea of how they want to approach the game and play the game. Usually when you're playing mid, bot or top, you just wait for your jungler and support to make the decision. I'm pathing into here. Okay, I need to adjust myself to that, because I just need to follow. If my jungler passed away from me, I'm not the one that's supposed to pressure. I just need to play cool and play safe. So they drive the game, and I think putting them in that position and putting them in that proximity would be way better than any other jungler for the short term. So for me, this is a risk, but it's a good risk, because I think if everything aligns well and good, we can be a tough contender, and I'm very happy with how we've started so far looking at our scrims.
By the way, just to extend the analogy there, obviously the main problem was every time he would show up there in the bot lane, and fucking Hylissang's playing Tahm Kench, shouldn't he? He got catfished. Where was that Leona, those hot-ass pictures I was seeing online? I got there, this is fucking Tahm Kench just going in, now we're all dead. What's that? Catfished, classic. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question for me would be like, why was there not an ability for Hylissang and Selfmade, two really good players, to decide on one style? Because you kind of made it seem like, they have two different interpretations of how to play situations. But generally speaking, when I hear that, normally like it's the job of scrims to try the different avenues and then see what works. It's like, were they just unwilling to compromise and play a certain style, or were they just so drastically different at so many different points that it was like impossible to fix?
Aren't they basically like the exact opposite players in that regard? Like I've heard basically Selfmade is more like the control style. Like I'm going to look for a moment when it makes sense to do X and Y. Whereas like, isn't the genius of Hylissang like you just go in, you just play off instinct, Yeah,
I would say, it's a mix of both, because in the end, we did a poor job of addressing the things, because I guess in the back of our mind was like, oh, let's just see where this goes. And then we got hit with the sickness, and then we're just way too late. So there's an element of us not putting in the right effort and putting in, the right, I didn't support the idea of them working together as much as I should have as the head coach of the team. And then also in terms of, how they approach the game, trying to find the right way to describe them both separately. Just need to think for a moment. I would say Selfmade views the game through the lens of his champion, in a sense of like, if he feels powerful, then he's going to, look to, use that power. Like he wants to search for his own power constantly. While Hylissang is very, very good at, using other people's power and set expectations on that power. And I think the disagreement sometimes was when Hilly, he's very, very good at squeezing like every penny. He's like, oh, should be ours. We should take this. Why are we not taking this? While, as you mentioned yourself, Selfmade would be like the more controlled approach. He would like take a step back and to take a little bit easier and get that extra camp and be happy with it, because the power is fueled into him. And I think when it comes to Bwipo and Hilly, their approach to the game is like, if they view strength in top, mid, bot, they just want to, move towards that strength and give up their own power to elevate that strength. And Selfmade is the type of player that likes to, dominate the game through himself.
I mean, pretty much what you're describing here is that Selfmade is just a much more selfish player than somebody like Bwipo. It seems like Bwipo in general is way more selfless with his like idea of how strong he needs to be, and we saw it multiple times when he was playing top lane, how he would just TP in situations that would be suboptimal for him if he thought it was like a game-winning play. So I guess that's going to be something that we can see going forward. If we want to go back into the Selfmade thing, was there ever like an option of keeping Selfmade after the season ended, or did you guys know that there was immediately going to be roster changes following the season?
On my end, I knew that there's a possibility for everything. So I worked in the capacity and like in the conversation that I had with the players that, you know, that we are going to stick together as five, and if something changes, something changes. It is what it is. And like the entire time ideas were floated, but in the end, if, you know, let's say that the Adam move wouldn't occur, then the players would be ready to play together as five, because I wanted to position myself and the team in a way where, you know, spring, there's a lot to learn from it. We can wear that 3-0 from against Schalke Scar proudly, and, you know, we can use it to improve ourselves. So either way, whatever happened, we would be fine coming into summer. That was like my goal. And I know that for Oscar was very important that he plays. He gets to actively play. He didn't want to be in a substitute position. And I wanted to, of course, you know, make sure that he's happy. That's important to me. He is good friends with Leader, and I'm sure he's happy at Vitality. So that was a central point of mine to make sure that he's happy, because I don't think keeping him jailed and keeping him on the bench and having him as a sixth member would make him happy. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I
I've
guess.
got a quick question. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna throw a joke in. I just wanted to know if there's any chance if Adam doesn't work out, will you return to support, put Hilly jungle and Bwipo top? Like we've seen it before in LEC. We've seen it right now. Are you coming back or what?
Maybe. It would have to be a big disaster on the top lane for that to occur.
Okay.
One question I had.
I'll just jungle.
One question I had was, do you think that Selfmade's background had anything to do with like issues he had in Fnatic? Because one thing I'll draw a contrast between is, like, if people don't know, obviously Selfmade is Polish. Like, if you've known any Polish people in esports, they're just very blunt. Like, their ways, like put it this way, if you didn't know them, and especially if you don't know their language, you would think they were like fighting when they were having like a team talk. But if you actually asked them, like, they would just tell him, no, I was just sorting out, like, you know, you did something wrong earlier, and then he said, I did something wrong, and it's fine, just play the game. But that's if they're all together. And similarly, if people, why I contrast them with Forgiven. If people know Greek people can be raw as fuck privately, like mad dark humor and stuff. So, like, again, if you come from that world, it's going to be different when you interact with a Swedish guy or a German guy or a guy from France or something. These are different cultures in that regard. Like, when you were working with Selfmade, how would you describe it? Because I don't want it to just seem like he's just a problem player or whatever. Like, what were the challenges of like trying to work with him, figure out what he sees the game as? Like, do you have any thoughts on what I alluded to earlier? Like, one of the things I heard that was kind of like a very weird, almost criticism, was that he almost was like a perfectionist with what he expected from teammates and stuff, which sounds like it's something that can be good. It could be a positive if you channel it the right way. But some people just won't like that. Like, they don't want you to have to, like, they kind of want room to make mistakes. You know, they want to feel like it's okay to fuck up every now and then. What would you say?
I think in regards to, like I've worked with a lot of Polish players. I wouldn't put him in some kind of a box. Like, the way I would describe him is, you know, he goes on feeling a lot, and he likes to keep it simple, and he wants conversations to be done quick. He doesn't want to linger around in conversations. He don't want to go into deep meetings about what's going on. He just wants to play the game. You know, play the game, feel what's good. This feels good. I'm gonna fucking do it because it feels good. And he plays on instinct and like his raw talent. So sometimes we had discussions, you know, about champions. I remember many conversations. One day we could come in. I'm like, okay, Olaf looks like a great champ. We're doing good with Olaf. And then let's say he played a game where Olaf didn't succeed at what he wanted to do. And then so Olaf all of a sudden was the most useless champion in the game. And then the ideas of the game shifted very, very quickly, because he likes to play on feeling. He likes to play on what feels good. And I think sometimes this was a little bit confusing between me and him, because we were trying to figure out what is best for the game, and his feeling changed sometimes. You know, he came in, the Olaf example, sometimes, you know, Hecarim was broken, next day wasn't broken, and it kind of went back and forth. And this sometimes was a little bit confusing, because he's, you know, very talented, you know, naturally talented.
Gosh, yeah.
But in terms of, you know, actively, you know, thinking about the game at the level of like a Bwipo, he can like carefully describe, oh, this is why this champion is good. This, it works in this scenario. I would probably approach defeating this champion. And Selfmade is more the type of guy, I feel this is good. I want to do this because it feels good, you know? Mm-hmm. And there's a level of, you know, both can function, but in the long term, you know, strict analysis wins out, in my opinion. So like Selfmade very blunt, wants to keep the conversation short. It's like, this is fucking bad, and then he wants to move on,
I mean, I feel like that's something that's normal for junglers, though. A lot of junglers, if you play a game that feels really bad, you can be really rash with your, like, analysis of how useless, or, like, you might, like, be very extreme with your ideas about, like, how a matchup goes. Was it something that was, like, set in stone, or did he ever, like, change his opinion off it? Like, so one day he comes in, Olaf is the most useless champion. Maybe, like, once he cools off, like, forgets the game a little bit, like, could you get him to, like, then pick the champions, or was it actually like he was changing his mind that quickly and, like, on such a knife's edge?
It's like, usually, like, I don't see, like, when I draft with a lot of information that I receive from players, right? It's like, when people blame me for draft, that's okay. That's no problem. You can do that. But drafts are complete. There's a team projects. There's a team projects with input from every player. And I think that shift in terms of what was strong made it more difficult to find consistency in our drafts, because throughout spring we didn't have good basics, and also an issue of ours was that we shifted our opinion from week to week on what champions are strong and what champions are not. The way I view draft is like, from day one, you start with a clean slate, and then you add what you think is good, and then you adjust. It's like a process that you build upon. It's like you receive new information, you change your ideas and opinions depending on this new information. But sometimes this new information didn't come and didn't flow, and then opinions still changed. And this caused a little bit of a confusion, because coming into each week, we had a hard time deciding this is the avenue that we went. Like, we had this one week where we went 2-0. I remember we played like Riven top, we played Seraphine mid, played Lilia jungle. And then like, we had this very unique draft where, we had these Exodia tweets on Twitter, like, wow, this is amazing. And then the next week, it's like, yeah, we don't want to play none of this shit. And it's like, there was no build on, there was no like, oh, this is working, let's build on this. It was just, let's start from scratch. This is not working anymore because something went wrong along the way. And this is not only an issue that I attribute to Selfmade, but it was just an in general issue that we had as a team. And it just, to pinpoint back, is like the reason I brought up with Selfmade, and I brought the example specifically with Selfmade, just to describe how I viewed him as a player. Plays on feeling, has good natural talent, and when he's in his rhythm in the game, he can find a lot of good opportunities to make himself shine.
Yeah, I mean, I think from here, I would like to go into a topic that I saw Thorin actually discussing with Amazing and Wicked, which is just the jungle role in general. It seems like there is, like, a really low opinion of how much skill it takes to play jungle. At this point, like, we're seeing not only Bwipo swap, we saw Treat swap, and just in general, like, when you see these types of swaps,
it's gonna be the most role swapped role aside from support, right?
Yeah, it's the most role swapped role, but then also like, normally when you see role swaps, they're role swaps that are in between seasons, so you have the whole preseason to learn the new role. That's when the major changes normally kick in, so it's like everyone is kind of lowered back to the same level, and then people are learning the game together at the same time. It seems like people just think the jungle is just a brainless role and anyone could play it. That's like what the vibe is from LEC. Like, do you have any worry about, like, potential changes to jungle? Like, what happens if more complicated champions come into the meta? What happens if situations happen where instead of full clearing, you're level 3 ganking, and you have to have, like, really good feel and knowledge for different jungle paths and what's possible? Do you have any worry about, like, this potentially affecting Bwipo, or do you think he's just a good enough player that he'll figure it out at the same level as all the other top junglers in LEC?
Yeah, the idea of him going to jungle doesn't stem from the idea jungle's fucking piss easy, you're gonna be okay. Because I think the entry level for jungling is quite easy, right? You can get away with, like, if you jump into a solo queue game, you just full clear, put a ward down, take a crab, base, then start full clearing again.
Yeah, great role.
Be ready for Drake, and then you just, like, I think there is some element of truth in that, because you can get away with doing that in some cases, but at the same time, I think at the higher end, it becomes a lot more difficult. I think you need to have a very good understanding of lane states and also game states, and either your teammates need to be very good at communicating, just pulling you like a ragdoll, like, you need to be here at this point in time, or you need to understand it yourself. Like, that flow of information needs to be there, because sometimes, skipping a camp in order to be on a certain wave can be so much more impactful than just taking a camp. So I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say, you know, like you only full clear, because I think there are some junglers that are absurdly broke, like Udyr is the obvious example, because you can full clear and you can be on time on everything, you scale super well. You know, this champion is inherently very, very broken because it's like the image of what makes jungle seem very easy. You just full clear and you win every fight. Doesn't matter if you didn't base or did base. You just this champion is just a beast, right? But when it comes to some of the other champions that are currently in the meta, and the meta is wide open, right? I think it becomes a little bit more complicated. You know, the champions that have been enabled due to the crab change with the smites, I think there's a lot more room for flexibility. Maybe when pro game starter came, we're going to see, you know, the same old patterns. But I think there is a lot more to squeeze when it comes to jungle. I think it was very easy to see in spring that Inspired and Elioya were ahead of the other junglers. But the other junglers were all kind of like whatever, you know? They were kind of here, whatever, you know? While Inspired could squeeze camps, you could know like, oh, I can invade the wolves. He was picking off camps, getting advantages, always being on the map, keeping up with tempo, being there for every Drake buff, you know, in terms of early game. Inspired was an absolute monster in that finals against, of course, Mad Lions. I think when you get to that level, you begin to see the nuance and you begin to see the difference. And I think that can be a game decider. The hard part about jungle, I would say, is that you're responsible for the whole game. I think that's what makes the role so hard. If you have a space out or you have a bad day, it's gonna fucking affect everyone. And if you're chilling on top and you die 2 times, you're getting solo killed, that's okay, you know? If you're like Nuguri and you get solo killed 10 times in scrims against Bwipo and you still win the game because you have Damon, that's you know, something that happens. I think in terms of jungle, it's like you fuck up once, you're gonna feel it for the rest of the game. Like this catch-up experience buff or patch was just a myth. That's for the silvers. That's for the people that DC, you know?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think the issue isn't necessarily that there's no skill expression in jungle. It's just that the difference between if you used to miss a camp or like you missed the timing, the amount of punishment that you were able to do is so much bigger than now, where like if you do full clear and you might have had an opportunity but you missed it and you still cleared all your camps and you went to crab, you're not actually that fucked. You didn't ruin the entire game as hard as, you know, if you missed a level 3 timing before. I mean, when the game was all about Nidalee, Renekton, Elise, like all these types of dives top lane, if you didn't hit that timing, you just lose the whole game. Whereas now it's like everyone just kind of can get away with full clearing, and it's harder to exploit like a bad jungler than it used to be. Like if you saw one of these like Chinese or Korean junglers against an NA jungler in an international tournament before, it was like the gap was massive. Like the enemy jungler would win the whole game. Doesn't feel the same. So I guess that's more of the issue is like what happens if the things are more punished, because I mean Bwipo is also the type of player that would have mistakes happen. Like he would die 1 time in lane or 2 times in lane when he shouldn't. And it feels like in jungle, you know, he might not be able to recover from that. So is that ever an issue? Because like what you just described could work against a player like Bwipo.
I think for now, in terms of our scrim results, I'm very happy with the level that we started at. I think it goes such a long way that Bwipo understands lane so well, so he understands when he needs to like affect them and impact them, which is something that we struggled with from both ends on spring. It's like both our laners didn't know exactly when to call the junglers and how to use the junglers to build advantages, and also our jungle didn't know too well how to use the lanes to create advantages. And I think Bwipo brings order to that. I think our bot lane was very good at creating advantages together with jungle. But other than that, you know, that was pretty much our whole game plan, right? It's like get an advantage through bot and hope we win in spring. And when it comes to Bwipo, yeah, sure, you can fuck up and it can be, you know,
catastrophic,
difficult. It can be catastrophic, but he's also the type of guy to figure something out. He's not gonna just sit back and just wait for the camps to spawn and hope that the enemy doesn't shove a fist in his mouth. He just kind of figure something else. Like, oh, this is my opportunity to shine. This is where I'm stronger. I need to go now. We need to set this up. He's a very, very good driving force to have in the game, because he was that in top, but the opportunities you get from top is way slimmer in comparison to jungle, because jungle is pretty much, just an oyster, just filled with opportunities of what you can do in the game.
Yeah,
Just to add, yeah, I wanted
Sure,
to comment on the fact, like the dive timers, like diving with Nidalee, Elise, like to me, like when people like to romanticize, the red into blue buff and then go into gank, like that to me wasn't difficult jungling if I look back at it, Like this to me, like it's easy to look back in the past and say, oh, these were times where it was very, very hard to jungle, but when it comes to that meta, when it was like red into blue into gank, or like, oh, you need to be on this fourth wave on top to dive, like that's still relevant, right? Sometimes you still see, like if you look at RNG play, there are many top dives, same wave stacking, you skip a camp, you dive. I think the higher end teams are still looking at the game through a lens that is much wider than just full clearing. And when I look back at the camp into a spam gank, for me, this wasn't really, insane skill either, It's like fucking, what's his name? IG's Jungler 1, fucking level 2 ganking. He won world's level 2 ganking. I don't see how it's crazy, insane to, sure he was good. I'm not going to try to flame him. He was good. But he won the world championship not doing something exciting. I could describe any jungle meta and make it seem simple. And sure, there were times where it's harder than it is now, but I still think skill expression happens at the higher end. Because for me, if I look at that finals between RNG and Damwon already at MSI, there was a lot of things the way he did that, made it scary to play against him. You had to think twice about everything that happened with the level 1s, with the potential level 3 ganks. Like their bottom was shitting their pants. They thought Udyr was in that bush at every point in the game.
Well, I mean, I think they were shitting their pants because they saw that Beryl was on their team in the bot lane, so it was more like they were scared of themselves than necessarily the enemies. Thorin, I wanted to bring up the fact that we've had Youngbuck on, we've had Leader on, we've now had Yamato on, and everyone across the board has been having great scrims. So for me, like, who are these teams scrimming against, and what qualifies a great scrim? Because everyone is having amazing scrims. So does that mean
I'll give you a little it's almost canned material, but it's a bit that I once did. It was actually on an Overwatch show when Monty was off in Overwatch. We basically took someone in Insight, and we had a concept like that for Overwatch called Oversight, right? Because it's a clever name, right? And basically, I did the same thing there, but here's how I explain it like this. The key is the exact descriptor words that they use. Because you'll notice, Dom, they don't all say, I'm winning most of my scrims. That's the key that gives you the secret. That's the Rosetta Stone that'll get you into it. Exactly. If they were winning the scrims, mate, they would say the word winning the scrims. Like if someone beats
we're winning the scrims. We're winning the scrims.
Someone beats Dam 1 the scrim, they tell you they beat Dam 1. Now here's what happens. If someone plays Dam 1 and thinks they're going to get shit stomped 5 scrims in a row, and they have one win and one game that was sort of closer than it should be, they go, we were doing well actually. We were doing better than we thought. That sounds like they're winning the scrims, but he isn't. You won one scrim and half a scrim. That's what they do. The code is, it's actually about their expectation going into the scrim as far as I can tell. So basically, the problem with that is the guy who says, oh, we're doing all right against G2, that's probably the guy who, just won one game where they thought they were going to lose every game. So I would say it's more along those lines. I know what you mean. Like, it does always sound like, how can everyone be winning 60 to 80%? But it's like, really, the question is who thought they were going to win no scrims, or who thought they were terrible, some shit like that.
Because we heard from Leader's like, yeah, we're just shoving SK into lockers and scrims. And then you hear SK come out, they're like, yeah, I mean, this has been going really well with treats and scrims. And it's like, what does really well actually mean?
I know. Exactly. Because that could be the most broad context. That look really well, like, Nick, you're SK gaming. What the fuck does that mean? That's what I want to know. Listen, the fact that they let you keep playing in LEC is very well. Like, give me some more than that,
Well, I could add like this, right? First week, I believe the schedule is out. If it's not, then, IWillDominate Crackdown exclusive. If it's perfect. We play against Mad Lions and Rogue, so we don't scrim those two teams. That's we play Misfits, Mad Lions, Rogue in our first Super Week, and we don't scrim those teams. So I can say that, right? And on top of that, it's like we are winning our games, but I have to say there are some teams out there that are just confidence boosters. Like, not even. It's like I don't know how to describe it. It's not even a confidence booster because you just know.
It just becomes sad at a point.
It's like you're playing a flex queue game. That's the level it's been at in some scrims. I'm not mentioning any names, but that makes it easier if half of the field that we get to scrim against is like, we should scrim someone else today.
I mean, so when we had Leader on last week, he mentioned potentially being in talks with Fnatic before the season started. And I was just thinking that you'd be the perfect person to ask about this because it seemed like those talks didn't really go anywhere. It seemed like Fnatic wanted to go a different direction. And I wanted to know, like, if you were one of the people that made those decisions at the time, like, did you have to choose between Nisqy and Leader before the season? And, like, if you did, what was the reasoning behind it?
Like, put it this way, it was implied that Youngbuck also was in the same position in Excel, and he basically openly said he didn't want Leader, essentially. So did you actually have, like, a choice of this?
Well, when I joined Fnatic, it was very late, and I think in this particular off-season, the input of the players was just very valuable to me, you know? It's like they came, like there was still a core, you know, at one point in those conversations, it was imagined also that Rekkles would continue, right? And there was a core and their opinion of which player they wanted to play with in terms of the signings, in terms of the process of moving into the next year. I chose to respect their input more than mine because I didn't have the same level of perspective that they have. But in regards to Leader, this is a player that I also spoke with during that period in time because we had conversations about potentially, you know, I don't remember what the roster was, but he had like a roster in mind. There was conversations about him potentially joining Academy. I had a conversation with him, and you know, Leader is a player. I would put him in a similar kind of box as Jiizuke. You know, this is a player that's intriguing to me because he is doing what fits him, and you know, if you find the right pieces to express that, you can have you know, glorious moments. You can have players. You can have a player like that maybe challenge the top players in that position due to the nature of how awkward it is to fight him. It's like he's like a southpaw. Like just boxing other people is going to be awkward because he's different. Something's weird about him, and I think that can create a competitive edge. It was the same with Jiizuke and Vitality. Yes. You know, we scrimmed against Giants, and I saw something in him where I knew this is a guy that is trying to actively, no matter what, win the game through himself and knows how to do it through his champions, and that is rare in some players. A lot of players that just go through the motion of playing the game, and whatever happens, happens. There's no, you know, kind of divine responsibilities. Like, I need to fucking win this game at no cost. It was the same. I remember when we played against C9, the fucking game at the World Championship that we fucking lost in the end. You know, even the moment until the Nexus died, Jiizuke was just giving his all. And then the moment the Nexus fucking fell, he just went into tears because he had just given himself to the game. And that is partially due to the story of Jiizuke and how he is as a person. And I noticed in talking to Leader that, you know, he had some similar characteristics and a similar viewpoint to the game. And I think, you know, when I watched Jiizuke's first year in North America, I was like, yo, they are fucking misusing him. They are caging him in. What is happening? Evil geniuses, what the fuck are you doing, you know? And it pissed me off because people's opinions of Jiizuke changed after that. And that annoyed me greatly because some players are like that. They just need something specific, a specific push. They need the right element of freedom in order to, you know, really, really excel. And I think a lot of people get scared of that. I remember back in season 5, you know, I wanted to continue on Rocket, and the roster I wanted to create was Jankos, Nuktak, Vander, Forgiven, and Cabochard. And at the time, you know,
Forgiven.
Yeah, that was great.
That's like all LCS level. Yeah, it's banging.
And everyone was fucking scared of a player like Forgiven and Cabochard because they had a reputation about them. I'm like, fuck the reputation. You know, as a coach, I need to make it work. You know, you see talent, you make it work. You see potential, you make it work. I think that's the responsibility of any staff. And that to me intrigued, it really, really intrigued me. And then the HOK roster happened and we went in different directions. I went to Splice, of course. We all went to the World Championship. They did better with the semifinals in that roster. And we got fisted by Samsung. Nevertheless, you know, players like that intrigue me, you know, players that have that raw ability, raw talent. You can see them succeed in the right environment. Like I think these players, I would put Leader in that box. And I had a conversation with him in the off season. I knew, like I told him, maybe in the future we'll work together because I don't plan to fucking leave. You know, I have many years ahead of me. Hopefully, you know, I want to be old and gray by the time I stop coaching in League of Legends. Hopefully, you know, the game doesn't die till then. Because I don't know if I can be arsed with learning a new game.
On this topic, this is one of those areas where I also get I consider this like a test type topic for coaches. Because when I hear coaches tell me the opposite, Yamato, like think of players that are considered like skilled but like difficult players. So like Forgiven, Dardoch, obviously Selfmade leader, these players all go into this category, right? Coaches that just say, or the player doesn't play like, the obvious way everyone else does, or they don't play the global meta, or they don't play the champions famous to their role. I'm like, are you aware you're their coach? Like, if I hear that there's a really brilliant player who has like a special charm and amazing skills and talent and potential, and maybe they're super driven to win the game, but they have a totally different view on the game, as a coach, like that would be exciting to me. I'm like, right, is there a way I could, like, what would be more exciting than to be the one who brought that potential out of that player, who made the team, that made the player into what a Forgiven can be? Obviously, people like Dardoch never really made it, but like what you think they're capable of. Like if that doesn't get you fucking going, if that doesn't like get the fucking hairs on your arm going, get out the game. Like the coaching ain't for you. Coaching isn't supposed to be, can I have the easiest possible assignment of players and players who all know how to play the game themselves, and I just sit back and go, well done, guys. Like, what would the point in that be? Surely the drive of being a coach is the problem solving and trying to maybe, in this case, enable a player that everyone else writes off, for example. Like, I'll tell you right now, if leader ends up being really good on Vitality, there will be a lot of teams and coaches in the LEC who think like, wow, were we listening to fucking Reddit narratives? Maybe we could have been the team that could have got this guy, but they wouldn't have taken the chance though, would they?
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100%. It's like, I believe the strength of an organization, the strength of a head coach, the strength of a management team is taking players like that and making them flourish under your wings, right? Like, to sign great players, what the fuck? Like, you don't want to be just Real Madrid that just buys the most expensive players and hope it works. Like, that's not the way. You need to have the culture to make sure that any type of player flourishes. It was the same thing with the Chicago Bulls, right? And they had their Dennis Rodman, Dennis Rodman is a fucking wild man. No one fucking wants him, and then you fucking bring him in, and he's a fucking genius, right? And I'm not gonna claim to know anything about NBA or basketball, but I've watched The Last Dance many times, so I have some facts from there.
I mean, of course. I mean, that's like next level. The problems that we're having in esports is like, oh man, like this guy like doesn't want to play a certain champion. The problems that Phil Jackson is dealing with is like, okay, so in between games, he's like going to like, Dennis Rodman's going to have sex with Madonna and like not sleeping for a week and just doing drugs and stuff, and then coming back and then playing a game like while like hungover and shit. Like that's a next level coaching problem that you have to deal with.
Yeah, of course.
There's a reason those guys get paid like the $10 million a year, put it that way. Like they're worth every fucking penny. One question I had then, because you were talking about, like players and players you could have played with or had in your team, right? I'm going to set this up the right way, right? Listen, this has nothing to do with Upset. Upset's a very good player. In fact, actually, I thought he did a great job kind of showing that he was as good as people said all those years. He just didn't have the right team around him. So it's not about him, right? But if someone says, Yamato, in any of those past years, imagine one day you get to be the coach of Fnatic, right? Part of what makes that cool as a vision is, I do get to coach Rekkles, right? He's been there the whole fucking time. So the analogy I would give is, right now this is going on in my game, CSGO, right? Which is, there's a bunch of Danish players who will have the chance this year to potentially join Astralis, who in CSGO were like the GOAT team. They were basically our version of like T1, like they won the World Championship in the worst times, incredible era. But the problem is, when you say to yourself as a young Danish player, imagine if one day I get to play in Astralis, you're obviously thinking to yourself, you with all the classic players, you want to be next to Device and Glare. You don't want to be the one who joins Fnatic, but like they're all gone and it's like you're in the new team. So in a mad way, like is that not a little bit underwhelming? Because as you said, in the off season, it was even thought maybe if Rekkles stays, like that is part of also what's cool about the gig, right? It's kind of a bit of a bummer. You never got the chance to actually coach him after having to compete against his teams for so many years, right? I'm sure you're wondering what it would be like or what you would bring out of him, right?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of positive conversations with Rekkles in the off season. I think we aligned on multiple topics. Like we were playing normal games just to chill, like while he was doing his negotiations and so forth. And we've had moments in history where like at some after party, at some event, like we both speak Swedish, we just talk shit about the people around us, and we just realize that we don't really want to be there, so we just discuss random topics, and then these after parties kind of suck. Maybe it's just me that's boring. But we've had moments in time where we've talked and we've bonded. I even played with him back in season 2. I remember for a couple of months before he pissed off to Copenhagen Wolves and Fnatic, which was a good decision, of course. When it comes to, like in the comparison Rekkles against Upset, like Upset has exceeded every expectation of mine. He really, really takes a lot of fucking responsibility in the team. He really, really cherishes Hilly-san. He really, really cherishes him and sees him for
you can tell
all
anytime
the
you talk to
potential
him.
he has, He fucking loves Hilly. He cherishes him and really, really takes every fucking opportunity to learn as much as possible from him and also actively, work together with him to improve him. Like they have a synergy that I've never seen ever before between two players because they really, really put in the hours. They put in the fucking hours. They work harder than any other bot lane I've ever seen, and it shows. Like they do all the time. They talk about the game all the time. I have to legit just, guys, are you fucking done? You have to stop reviewing. We're in Champion Select. That has happened at least 5 times every day since I've started working with them. It's a fucking blessing. And in regards to your question, no, sure. In the beginning, I had this image in my mind that, okay, I'm joining Fnatic to continue what they've started, and I want to be the thing that is the difference maker in those finals between G2 and Fnatic. That was my image in the beginning when I started negotiations. And then I realized, in spring that these expectations, this idea of continuity is just a big mistake. This was my biggest mistake, expecting that continuity. And I think the players also expected that continuity, but in reality, it was just a whole new book. It was a whole new book. It was different fucking writing paper, different pens. We needed to just understand that the dynamic is different because we have 2 new players and a new coach. And with that being said, I realize as I'm rambling, I completely forgot your question, Thorin.
Right. It was just before, if you'd wanted to coach Rekkles and not getting to do so.
I was curious. It's like Rekkles is one of the greatest players that has played in Europe. I think it's only natural for me to, as a coach, to want to perceive him in action because we scrimmed against him a lot, and I've had those moments in time where I've gotten to speak to him, and you hear those rumors and you get intrigued. What's there? Maybe you can learn something. Maybe you can add something to your own repertoire. Maybe you can potentially get even more out of a player like that, which is also exciting in itself.
Yes.
And like I think anyone that wants to compete wants to gravitate towards players that are great. I think that's only natural.
Yeah.
By the way, because this kind of ties into what you were saying earlier about like some of the problem. Like, for example, when you said earlier, if you had a moment in the split where there was an argument and someone slammed the desk, if someone took that one incident and they don't know the context of like other teams, they could blow that up as like, wow, there was a violent dispute between the coach and the players. And whereas what they don't know, and I'm sure you found this out yourself because you've been coach of the lesser teams, and this is your chance to like join one of the big orgs, as you say, one like the legacy orgs that's supposed to be in the finals. One thing that's so easy for competitors even to get lost in is when they're in the bad teams, or for example, if they play with like one of those players I described earlier, like a Forgiven or something, they deal with a player like that, and then they naively think, and this is such a big mistake, they think this only happens in this team or with this fucking guy. In the top teams, everything's great. They're so professional. It's like, it's not like that at all. So first of all, like, it's always interesting to me when you've been on those ESSA teams and it all looks super bright and rosy and green on the top team. You have to find out when you get there that they have their own fucking they're having young but cold stories. They're having, they would be having scenarios where people were having actual meltdowns, and then that's like in games in a series, and then you go back into game 4 and you win, and suddenly everything's fine, And similarly, like when you, as you said about star players, it's not even that you're like so arrogant you assume you'd be better, but like if I'm a coach, if I've had some other guy, and think of it like chess, imagine he just has all these pieces that are stronger than mine. At least give me a go. Let me have a go to see what it's like to have a super, like twice as good rook as you, and or fucking knight that can move an extra spot. That's what it's like to have the superstar players. So as a coach, I just want my turn, that's all. I'm not saying I'll win, but give me my turn at least,
No, for sure. No, it makes a lot of sense. Like, it's also, I guess the additional layer of difficulty is that when you bring these star players together is that they've seen a way that they've won, and in their mind, this is the way to win. But in reality, in reality, there's many different ways to win, right? It can change also, especially in the games that we're playing. Like things change, the whole dynamic of the game change. A team wins the world championship, and all of a sudden you need to relearn the game somewhat, 100%. And I think that's where the difficulty comes in, making players like that align. Because in reality, the way the game is being played is almost often you can boil down to simple sentences, but making everyone get behind the same sentences is the difficulty of it all, for sure.
Definitely. By the way, Dom, I thought a question I could ask you about, because you actually watch the LPL. I mean, you're even hinting, if people see it on Twitter, it's hinting maybe, Dom doing a thonking face, and they're saying the LPL's got a big announcement. All I'm going to say is fucking put 2 and 2 together, everyone. You can probably figure out what it is. So my question for you is this, Dom, because I know Yamato, one thing I very much enjoyed on some of my other shows, like 2 years ago when I had him on like So Many Insight, was where he had this whole perspective he came up with, where he was actually, it was actually when he was in the Korean team, of like precision versus accuracy, and it was all about it was activity and precision, sorry. So his premise, for example, basically he kind of like found a way to solve the problem Monty always had with League, which is the reason Monty could never appreciate the LPL is because he could see that, yeah, objectively, if you've paused the frame on a fight, a lot of the skirmishes are not ones where they can know that they're definitely going to win the skirmish or who's going to get the kill. So to him, he thought it was like the chaos style of Unicorns and Love Bombs. It's too messy, they're just gambling, it doesn't make sense. Whereas to him, what he loved about Korean League of Legends is the idea that, you know, it's like a clockwork machine that's supposed to, and so you know if this was correct before you've done it, and you do it, and it's like you can kind of grade how well someone played. So Yamato's premise instead was like, no, the idea there is, in this particular like very broad strokes example, the LPL team is just upping the activity, they're having way more active on the map, therefore they don't need the same precision, because for example, like their style of play might be to throw you off or to get a certain amount of kills onto a certain champion early in the game, regardless of what the game state is. So
yeah, Fnatic was a little too active, that's what I'll say. A little bit too much activity.
But what I wanted to draw this into is, being as I know Yamato through his whole career has basically preached, kind of like I do. Like I don't like the whole like global meta thinking of there's one way to play the game. It was nearly always in the past just whatever the best Korean team did. You watch what they do, that's the blueprint, and you have to copy the champions, the comps. You have to try and do what they do, and then you have to somehow hope you can do it better, right? One of the reasons I thought I'd bring this up is now, especially at the moment, even though the game in some sense because of the objectives is limited as to how you play, it does feel though like it's still the case that the teams that play to their style the best are the ones that have the better chance to win. Like the reason I thought I'd bring Dom in on this is I personally don't actually think RNG was even the best team in China. Like when I watched most of the LPL and even most of the playoffs,
I think
I thought like FPX, I think even EDG in the regular season looked better at times, you know, even though they had worse players. Like I thought these teams looked actually better. But the point is, if you look at RNG, they played to their fucking style. They played to exactly the idiosyncrasies and weird things that Xiaohu did. Like they didn't try to copy like this global meta. So what do you think about where the game's at the moment? Like for both of you here, like do you think it is the case that, like in your case, Yamato, do you stick to your old approach of like, I'm just going to do what makes sense for my team? Or do you try and look at like some ideal of what the best team does and take some of that? Also Dom as well, obviously, because like, you watched all the LPL as well, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say about it is you have to like understand, like I think that what you should be doing is trying to play what you believe is optimal, but then being realistic about where the strengths of your own team lie. So you can try to play like the Rumble Jungles of the world, like but if that's too complicated for you, like understand that just because the enemy team has an OP champion doesn't mean you automatically lose the game, which is something that I think RNG was really good at. You know, like they identified they have the best Kai'Sa player in the world on their team. Well, if their Kai'Sa player is that good, even if Ghost gets a winning lane, Galius still going to be able to have an effect in the game at some point. It just means that he's not going to come out of lane ahead, but you don't necessarily need to win every position at every single point in order to win games of League of Legends. So, I mean, I think the thing that I liked about RNG is that they have their own strategies that they put together, and they tested out multiple strategies at the tournament to see what worked and what didn't. And the ones that it seemed like they were executing well on, for example, like the Gragas top strategy, where they were able to like find multiple different engaging angles. They decided to go through with that towards like the finals and stuff. And the strategies that they tried out that seemed lackluster. So for example, in LPL, one of the things they did is they left up Zoe a lot, played TF into Zoe, which isn't a great lane, but then they were able to just like get enough picks on the map that they were able to win out a lot of those games. That seemed to not work as much, and they decided, hey, we're going to just ban Zoe and default to some of our other strategies. So I like teams having identities and strategies that they're comfortable on, that are willing to be pulled out in different situations, because sure, like there'll be champions that are OP, but most of the champions that are OP have some form of counters. So it's about finding comps that like actually have an element of that counter that you have extreme levels of expertise on, that you can just play better than the enemy because of like your understanding of how all the champions like work together. I mean, if you're a jungler and you've played 100 games with TF and scrims with Cryan's TF, it doesn't matter if TF is not the strongest champion. You'll be able to understand like what are the strengths of TF. Like, can we play to like a side lane? Can we play like an aggressive 1v1 top matchup, dive it with TF and just win the game through there? So I mean, I think that like overall, like when I try to judge drafts, like I'll talk on my stream about drafts in a vacuum, but I also will understand that certain teams just can't play certain styles, and you need to actually understand where the limit is between playing the best things possible and playing things that you're good at. So that's just my take on it. Yamato, you have anything you want to add? Because I know there's a question to both of us.
No, for sure. Like I think the element of what the players are and making sure that they have enough freedom to express what they think of the game is important, because I think it's disingenuous to say that the game is figured out, because it really isn't. I think there's multiple ways of playing the game. There's multiple ways of approaching the same situation. Often you can review and you can come to terms to things, but the game in itself is naturally chaotic. There's a lot of variables that you need to figure out through the sheer force of experience and also through the sheer force of who you are as a person. I think there's like a skeleton, there's a strong bone, in what League of Legends is and how the games look like. That there's dragons, you play for drakes, you play for Rift Herald, you play on specific timings, you're level 4, you're strong at level 6. And so forth. There's clearly some things that carry between the games, that you can just replicate between the games. But there's often a lot of variables. I don't know how many different combinations of champions you can have to make 5. I think it's
billions.
Absurd.
Sure.
There's millions, and then to consider those 5 in the context of the other 5 that you play, right? Always there's something new, unless the meta is so fucking boring that the same champions are being played over and over again, like it usually was back in the previous years when Korea won over and over again. Like everyone tried to follow them. They played the same champs, and like the amount of champs you played at the Worlds was very slim. Like everyone played 5 champs, and the amount of champs and the amount of exploration that occurred was very little. And then we had that breakthrough. Like I think G2 was a big push with this back in also when the AD carry role got shafted and people playing APs. Both kind of opened everyone's mind.
Was deleted.
Pretty much, yeah. It opens everyone's mind to what possibilities lie within the game, right? There's a place for every champion in the game. And in the context of how I perceive the game, I rarely try to push, like, this is the way the game should be played. You guys have to play this way. Often I was like, this is a problem. How do you guys solve it? Or you guys don't know how to solve it? How about, look at this. Look at this. I have this in my left hand. What do you think of this? I try to guide instead of to say, oh, this is the way you play it, because I think there needs to be an element of expression in the way you play. If I look back at Splice, we went to the World Championship. Back in spring, we were in relegations. And then in summer, we figured out that we were very, very terrible at early game. Every game that we played, especially that best of 5 against H2K that we won, we were often very behind. We struggled to, compete with Forgiven and Wander in lane. And we figured out a way to surpass that and get to a point where we could split push, because we were very, very good at avoiding the H2K death ball, because they like to group as 5, they like to force fight, they played around that, and we were very good at just split pushing our way to victory. When was playing Fiora, we were playing Kassadin, like Senkox at the time was called Void King, because we were just playing these Void champions, and our approach to the game was just very, very macro heavy and try to force the transition to mid-game as early as possible. Mid-game to me is when outer towers begin to fall. And that was our whole game plan, because we were terrible at early game. We just couldn't. When we went to the World Championship and we played against fucking Flashfuls and Scrims, and they had Maple and fucking Karsta playing Elise LeBlanc and Lee Sin, we just got so absurdly fisted. It was insane, because the thing that happened before playoffs was that they just removed lane swaps from the game. So that was tough for us. But in order for us to succeed and to get wins on the board, we needed to play this certain style. In order for us to be successful in Vitality, we needed to start the game from minute 1. We wanted to be awkward to play against. We wanted to be different from everyone in LEC. We wanted to make sure that Fnatic get worried when they play against us, because practicing against other teams is not helpful to prepare for Vitality. And my guys, Cabochard is the type of guy that wants to, put his hands around the enemy top laner's neck and he wants to squeeze it hard. And Jiizuke was the type of guy, I want to help you, And it was just the perfect identity for us, because the philosophy we had was we'd rather have a gun with one bullet, and then, we come with the idea that we get to shoot first. And if we miss that bullet, okay, fuck it, we lost. The guy has a knife and he begins to stab you, and the only hope is that he stabs himself in the eye for you to win, which happened a couple of times. We had like Splice throwing games and we just backdoored. That happened many times because my guys were good to realize, we fucked up. Okay, we need to get creative to win games, and that happened very often. So that was our style. We wanted to be awkward, and at the same time, Jiizuke and Cabochard got to express themselves so much throughout the games. For me, that's like some kind of art form. Like Jiizuke was playing fucking well in Vitality 2018, 2019. He had some health issues that he solved later on. Cabochard was all-star top laner, right? And then coming into the years in 2020, when I see Cabochard on Vitality, and they are not even fucking reaching playoffs.
I've got to ask you about this exact topic. Come on, listen, I know obviously some of your former players, listen, some people's careers up and down, but these two players I have to ask you about, because Jiizuke,
I was gonna ask
in my opinion, is one of the #1 victims of what I just said about global meta thinking earlier.
Yes.
No joke, in his team, I don't know who in Evil Geniuses signed Jiizuke, but whoever you are, you didn't have any clue who the fuck Jiizuke was. Because the idea you sign that guy and then tell him partway through the split, just play Orianna and Azir all the time, mate. First of all, you don't know the player you have there. That is so short-sighted. And then secondly, because he doesn't do what you want on that set, just bench him, he's gone. That, you haven't understood at all how to build a team around him. And then for Cabochard, you can take which order you want to go with on these ones. The idea he's not even in LEC now. What? I think this guy is one of the most underrated LEC players ever, because we're talking about years in a row of being an elite level player at your position. This guy legit might have stacked 3 or 4 years in a row of being one of the absolute best in one of the better regions at his role. It doesn't matter where Vitality was placed. He was always one of the best top players. The idea he isn't even in the league at all, and no one even talks about him, dude. He's just
he got signed to K Corp.
It's no big deal to anyone. What do you think about this? Because I feel like these two players, other people have kind of misused these guys, mate.
It's fucking criminal. I was in Vitality, right? And then this decided to go a different direction very late in November. So I was like, yeah, my fucking options kind of suck. Let's just fucking cast the LEC and just wait, And then I waited and went to Sandbox. I was very happy. But then I see how Cabochard is being used and how Jiizuke is being used. And it's very clear to me that the coaches on those teams think the game should be played a certain way, and it's either go my way or there's no way, right? And I think to have that level of ego in League of Legends is fucking crazy to
me. Especially in coaching, man. You're a fucking coach.
Yeah.
You're not like the dictator of who plays.
I need to fucking learn every day about the game. I need to actively learn, and I love that. I love that about League of Legends, that I have to actively learn. And the players are also teaching me things like, wow, look what I did with this champion. I'm like, holy shit, I didn't know this. That's amazing. Because the players are on the front line always figure out the next new thing. You just have to play constantly at the highest level to constantly, see those new things appearing. It's only natural that, they are pretty much the pioneers of the game, because constantly it's just a process of exploring. New patches come and you have to explore, and you need to be willing to learn. I study the VODs, I study the game always, and I realize that everything I know today might be wrong tomorrow. And I also know that the game can be played in many different ways, and it's important that the players feel right in what they're doing. If it feels wrong what they're doing, you're not gonna amount to anything. And I think that's very, very common. In Korea, it was very different, right? I coached in Sandbox, and it was surreal because everything that I said was like, okay, we're gonna do this blindly. No questioning, nothing. Okay, he said we're gonna do this, we can fucking do this. I remember this one time, right? We played against T1 and we did the Sona bot strategy. And we practiced it against our academy. We had mixed results. It wasn't too exciting, but T1 was something that we struggled with the entire year. We didn't win a single scrim, a single game against T1. So I'm like, okay, let's throw it on the board and let's see how it fucking works out, And the player's like, okay, let's do it. But then after the game, I realized that they didn't want to fucking do this at all. Like, all of them didn't want to fucking do this. Like, they played it awkwardly. They felt uncomfortable. And I had to pretty much force that out of them for them to say it. And with that in mind, it was crazy to me because I understand now how everything, kind of pans out if you look at the story of League of Legends, If that level of discipline and how the game was approached, you do this in these steps, play this champions, it is a very, very good way of creating like a winning team, But when there's an element of chaos, which G2 brought, right? When G2 era came in, LPL, IG, when they brought that element of chaos and they test limits, the thing that you manage to find when you're playing in the LPL and you're trying to actively push your level of activity is that you actually learn faster too. When you try to push the limits of what you can do, you learn faster, and I think that created an edge. And when I was playing, it was like in Sandbox, when we scrimmed against Damwon, I knew right away that these guys are fucking dangerous because in scrims, they were going fucking ballistic. They were fucking running it down, testing limits, they were going crazy. And then when we played them first time on stage, they threw shit at us that I'd never seen before because they were willing to explore. They were willing to express themselves throughout the game. I also heard that they were meditating and shit. And that balance of chaos and at the same time having that level of discipline that Korea, in general, like Korean players have, was just a deadly story. So when I scrimmed against Dama, I was like, holy shit, this is fucking dangerous.
Yeah.
And I realized as I'm rambling, I keep forgetting how we got here.
I have no idea. Mate. Don't worry about
well, I mean, I have something.
Feel like. Yeah, go on, Dom.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to throw this in where I feel like the approach is completely different between like Chinese teams, for example, and European teams and NA teams, where it feels like NA and EU a lot of the time are trying to get to this level of like understanding the perfect level of play or like what is optimal on the patch, where it seems like LPL, which is ahead of all of the regions, actually has a much like more humble approach where they're like, well, being perfect is not achievable. So it's mainly about like doing things that we think feel correct and then figuring out why they went well or why they went wrong. So like reverse engineering what happens after the fact instead of, trying to reach this perfect level of play. Like, do you have any like comment on that or any ideas about that mentality of, flipping it at times and reverse engineering the flips? Something that Nelson talked about on our show, compared to like pursuing perfect drafting and perfect gameplay overall?
I think it's good to train the idea of, like just play with whatever boundaries that you are set in when you pick a champion. Because like I've been in situations like, yeah, this draft is unwinnable. And then like the players just actively play worse because in their mind, the draft is unwinnable. But that's not how you solve problems, right? And I think when you have an example like Gala with Kai'Sa, like this is a person that has played so much Kai'Sa that he understands exactly the windows of power that he has, and he also understands how to achieve those windows of power. And there is an element of knowing more than your enemy that applies in League of Legends. Like sometimes when you throw out a champion that no one has ever played before, it's the same like with Bwipo when he busted out the Rengar top against the Camille that was FPX that later turned into World Championship that year. He was like solo killing this guy, and it's like, what the fuck? I never played against Rengar in my life. I don't know what the fuck this champion does. And there's an element of him knowing a lot more that he can leverage, right? Because it's very difficult to expect each player to know every fucking matchup inside out. It's just too difficult. And I think when you've invested a lot of time into something, that's why I mentioned before, like draft is something that you build upon. It's not something that you scratch every fucking week, new patch, you put everything from scratch. You need to build upon it because you invest time into something. You need to make sure that it's worth it long term. Otherwise, it's a really wasteful investment. Like if I tell Upset to practice Kai'Sa 50 games and then it got nerfed once, and I'm like, yeah, this champion is trash now. We're not going to play it. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? It needs to be like sometimes, of course, Riot completely annihilates champions, and we have to make that decision. But you need to kind of see how you allocate your time because you only have a set amount of games to play throughout a year. Like how many games does a pro player play in one split? Like if I would have to guess, it would maybe be like 1,000, 2,000 maybe. 2,000 maybe would be generous on the high end. Mm-hmm. And if you're wasting games there, you're going to run out of luck because, they need to amount to something for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to me, one of the areas that like this fucks up is it's like you said before. Too many people think that the game is like semi-solved. You know, like they try to imply that like, oh, we know a lot of things, and especially I think the ultimate way they wreck themselves is they lock themselves into thinking things that they learned in past years still not only apply but are the best now, and that you can't sort of deviate. So in my opinion, Korea is the obvious example because they went so far down this like very like calculated vision control based style of like knowing that you're going to get how many kills before you go to the team fight, and should we back off if we lose one kill. They were so deep into that like world view of League of Legends, it took them a long time before they could get anywhere close to where LPL was. It's like the two paths of evolution were so divergent they weren't even vaguely related. Whereas like one thing I've always thought when I watch LPL and they're doing all these skirmishes and fights all the time is like, dude, some of our ideas about League of Legends don't even make sense. Like, for example, think about a normal cast. Let's say we have a skirmish randomly in some part of the map, right? And the team that's slightly ahead gets 3 kills and the team that was behind gets 2 kills. And so on paper as a caster, because you don't have time to pause it and calculate, you just say, right, it was a 3 for 2 and, one team like slightly won out there. But did they? Which champions did the kills go on to? Like, what if the 2 kills went on to like some AD carry that's not even supposed to be good in lane? That might change the whole game instantly, even though technically the 3 kills went to the other team. But what if the 3 kills on the other team is like one's on a jungler who was slightly behind, so it's even now? You know what I mean? Like, a kill is not a kill is not a kill. They're not all equal. And another thing, in my opinion, that the LPL has massively understood that the LCK still does not. I can't believe the best Korean minds haven't figured this out. They still act like deaths and kills in the game are equal and linear throughout the whole map. That never makes sense. Like, a death at like 40 minutes in a certain game could ruin the whole game for you. You could lead to a team wipe. You could lose literally the entire game. A key objective. Sometimes there's a fight you can take at 5 minutes into the game, then it won't even ruin the game if you lose it. Like, you can flip that one, and it's actually a flip worth taking. The Korean team, I feel like, still looks for the perfect moment when, like, the LPL team knows the moments that it's better to gamble early with certain comps at these times in the game. You don't have to worry about, like, going for the one perfect moment, like, it's just a way of conceiving the game, in my opinion. It's different. It's not even the actions they're taking. It's the reason why they do it. Because, like, as you say there, mate, like, it reminds me of that classic quote where I've looked it up now. It's by a guy called Arthur Schopenhauer, and the quote goes, you'll have heard it before, it says, talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. The premise, like Dom's saying here, is the LPL they're not really sat down like knowing what's going to happen. But once something just seems to work, they'll figure out the reasons after the fact. I feel like the Korean people, they have to somehow know before why it's going to work and in exactly what steps. Otherwise, they won't attempt some of this stuff. It's why I made this joke many times. It's almost gotten sad now. If you ever go and look where people do translated versions of Cloud Templar talking about international tournaments, half the time it's just him like coping in his own mind with the fact that like some of the stuff that's happening doesn't make perfect sense. Like, he's always sort of confused as to why the LPL team does something a certain way, or do they really know the meta better than us? Like, you can see he doesn't quite, like, he's still in the old world view to me,
Yeah. I mean, I think that the other thing to add on to it is just like how the game functions as a whole, where people have this idea of like kills and stuff like scale to infinity, but that's actually just not the truth. There's a cap on everything, right? Like, you can only have so many items in a game, at which point gold no longer matters at all.
Yes,
like,
gold leads to the other classic one, of course. Yes,
yeah, exactly. So there's times where like you have to be not only just looking at like the raw results of who won the fight, but you also have to look at like how far was the team behind. Like, if a team is really far behind and they take a fight and they go 2 for 5, that could be a winning fight for them, or like that could be better for them than the opposite of like, not getting the kills at all, or not getting shutdowns, or not having the ability to scale to that point in the game. So that's something that I completely agree with, where people have this like warped perception of what ahead and behind means in a game, due to the fact that there's like a bunch of limiting factors with champion picks, but not only that, with how the game as a whole functions. So yeah, I completely agree.
I'll give you an example. Put it this way. If I said to you as a coach, right, at this point in the game, like 15 minutes into a game, you can take a fight where, again, it's going to be like they get 3 kills and you get 1, but your 1 kill goes to a player who can then instantly get an item, which makes his champion strong. You might take that. Like, that's suddenly not like the 3 for 1 angle's irrelevant there, because that's another thing about League I feel like so misunderstood. People talk talk about scaling, so they imply they know that champions are strong at different points in the game. But certain champions just do way better with items at certain points in the game. Like, I'll tell you right now, as someone who I always joke about this, but it's true, I already play a Pyke every game all the time, no matter what. I already play support, to be fair. So, but when I do that, right, one of the reasons, if you've ever played with a Pyke or a Yasuo player, that they play like a dickhead, it's because it doesn't matter if we're down in kills or deaths or whatever. We know that every kill we get could literally turn into the items that let us carry the game. So that's why we will throw the game trying to get the kills. But the point is, all kills are not equal. Like, the kill that goes onto the Pyke player at a certain point in the game turns his whole game around. Before that, he was going to throw the game. Now he's going to carry the whole game. So, like, I feel like this is where, again, looking at the game as though it was like a chessboard and everything's figured out. Like, we're so far from being figured out in this game. There's so much room for experimentation and genius angles. Because what's great about a lot of the examples we're given here is they have nothing to do with the traditional laning phase. It's not about, in this laning phase, I get slightly ahead and I could have kill pressure. No, that's the part that everyone can plot out. It's the reason why, by the way, if you don't know, in the chess world, supposedly, the thing that traps all the noobs is they get obsessed with the openings because they think if I have the perfect opening, I'll always be ahead. What they don't realize is you can have as many good openings as you want, mate. Eventually, you're going to have to play the mid game against someone, and if they're better than you, they'll beat you. So actually, what you need to learn is fundamentals of how the game works. And once you have those concepts, you can tie it back into what we said earlier. It's the reason why I actually agree. I think people like, here's what's funny. I think if we're talking about just as a pure top laner, I think Bwipo was probably average. But as an actual top laner playing the game, he was one of the better ones in the LEC. He understood how to win the game when he was down in kills, when it looked like he was hitting, when he looked like he didn't know what he's doing. Like, he actually had a better view of the map than most of the other top laners for me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
No, for sure. Like, I think in terms of laning, he's very good because he looks at it as, this is my opportunity. This is my champion is strongest. I need to use it. So often you saw, like, there's many YouTube videos, the Bwipo trade where he just all ends level 1 because he's like, yeah, my champion is a really strong level 1. This is the point that I need to win. So with GP, I'm going to all in level 1. You know, this is a very different and more nuanced way of looking at the game because he wants to win and use his opportunities. Now, I think definitely like the example with the kills, I think that just speaks to the amount of chaos that is available in the game that you can potentially create. And also on the topic of, you know, scaling, I think often what is being showed on the broadcast for like the average fan, it's very, very deceptive, right? Like I remember there was this game that I was casting and I remember there was a 2v2 on top that ended with like a Jax killing an Irelia and the Jax was up 1-0 and he had a TP advantage. And on broadcast, I said, this is going to be very impactful for the game because he's going to have the momentum in this matchup for the rest of the game. So you're going to see as it unfolds, he's going to reach key items earlier, it's going to impact the game heavily. And I remember I had my second screen because we were casting it from home. People were talking like, shit, it's like, this game is fucking even, he's biased towards his team. I was like, it's very, very deceptive, the metrics that the average fan gets to see on broadcast. They just see the champions, which is easy to discuss. Oh, this champion did this. I'm going to take someone else's opinion and make it mine and just, you know, be super cool because I saw someone's opinion. The gold is like this. The kills are like this. The towers are like this. This game is even, but there's so much more to it because scaling the same way, another level of chaos is a champion. It is fair to say that a champion always scales well. That can be an occurrence. But sometimes there are champions that only scale well in the context of what champions you have around it and against it. Like I remember making this example on broadcast where, you know, people always have this image that Azir scales super well, but not always. What if he's playing against a composition?
A Kog'Maw or something, AP Kog or something.
Yeah, AP Kog. Like all of a sudden you have a champion that doesn't scale so well and he has to be in the mindset that this game needs to end fucking early. That's the same thing for Kassadin. Like let's say you're playing Kassadin against Camille, Maokai, and the enemy has no fucking AP. There's a Pantheon. Like there's no element of scaling there because these champions naturally prey on a champion that everyone in their mind has good scaling. And with this being said, it's always contextual to the champions, and that context can change so rapidly because there's so many different combinations of champions. Sure, there's a red line that you can follow, and there is some context that you can find, and this team is ahead in gold. That can be helpful, but the nuance is always in the details. And as you mentioned, you know, you can be 5k gold behind, but if you have concentrated gold on a member that is going to actively counteract everything that the enemy team wants to do, let's say you have that Cog. Yeah, right. The Cog counters the enemy composition because he outranges all of them and the enemy needs to force on him. And then all of a sudden he's 5-0, but all of his teammates are 0-5. Doesn't fucking matter because you have the weapon that contextually outscales the enemy weapons, right? So it's always about the context and always about the details. And with this in mind, the game is far from solved. There's a lot of elements that are solved, and there's a lot of ideas that you can apply, but there's an element of chaos that always happens in games. It's hard to stay away from it.
And
sure.
I feel like that's just when you watch professional play and when you watch like MSI, for example, that's one of the reasons why you're able to see like how good a team like RNG really is. It's not necessarily that they make perfect decisions all the time, but if you're constantly forcing the enemy team to make hard decisions, eventually they're going to fuck up. Like, there's no team that is so good, and most people had this perception of Dom1 because they won Worlds being the best team in the world and like understanding how to like team fight and do like late game macro better than anyone possible. But RNG puts them in so many uncomfortable situations where you're like, oh, well, they might have taken a fight and lost a kill, but they're still strong enough to like contest the Baron, and Dom1 starts the Baron, and then RNG ends up killing them all on it. There's all these different things that happen within the game. And when you watch like teams like RNG play, for example, just to throw it back to the precision thing, you can tell that they didn't get good at Barons by having this like great idea of how every single Baron should play out, and it's literally just by the practice. Like, they walked the Baron and started it enough times to have such a good sense, like just the innate ability to determine how much damage they have, who needs to take it, how they turn, what people need to turn. Like, they've just been in the situation so many more times that they're able to now instinctively interpret what should go on and what's optimal when the enemy team has no idea. So I feel like that's a huge advantage.
They have more reps. They've done it more, of course.
They simply have more reps.
And just to add, like in the whole conversation of, like I always do this thing with precision activity, you will learn a lot more if you try to be super fucking active. Yes. Like, you will learn more rapidly, you will understand your champions more rapidly, you'll understand the depth of your champion if you're willing to take risks. Like, I remember, like, Jiizuke was telling me his fucking first year in EG, they're like, yeah, our coach tells us that we can't die in scrims. Like, dying is really, really bad. Dying is really bad. Dying is bad. If you die, it's bad. And I was
what do you say that to Jiizuke of all people as well? That's so much.
I mean, but what are we gonna say? Killing them is good too. Like, what do we? Yes, we know these types of things. Like, if you kill the Nexus, you win the game. Like, what the fuck? Do they have John Madden coaching this team? Like, what the hell is going on here? It makes no sense.
And it does sound like a terrible atmosphere for scrims, though.
Yeah. It's just you're confined and you're playing to look good. Like, you're playing to show something instead of actually learning. I think in Vitality, our win ratio on scrims, like when in 2018, was like 20%, 15%. It was just fucking bloodbath. But I just made sure, we need to learn from these fucking games. Let's take everything away and we make sure that we fucking learn. And then when we played on stage, we felt fucking comfortable. We knew what we were capable of. We knew the limits of our champions, and then you had like glorious moments where Jiizuke is like 1v3ing because he has tried that and knows what works, and he knows the limits of his champion. And I think this is just something that goes such a long way. And I think this was a big mistake, what happened with North America for quite some time when they were importing a lot of the Korean coaches. They expected that some of the North American players are going to operate at the same level of discipline that the Korean players can. Because what was so fucking impressive to me when I was over in Sandbox is, the energy in the room. Like, everyone fucking knows this is what it takes to be a fucking pro player. Scrims finish, we take a break, everyone takes a nap to make sure that they're fucking energetic for the second block. And then the moment the scrims finish, take a little break, and then boom, right into solo queue. And the energy in the room is like fucking, you can't be not disciplined because everyone's fucking working hard. And this is just, the standard. I was working with 15 players, and all of them fucking knew what it took to fucking, work hard and to be disciplined and to put in the work and to listen to feedback. And I understand in a past world where the game was, solidified in a way and everyone was trying to follow Korea and they were always going to be behind. Followers are never going to become leaders. And then, the North America tried to import these coaches and reapply the same thing, and it just doesn't work because culturally it's just not the same fit. It just doesn't work at all. Because for me, like, Korean players are just fucking insane, like, individually, really, really fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've completely agreed. I mean, Thorns beat this topic to death, but this idea of ahead and behind really makes no sense in the context of League of Legends when it's perfect, when it changes so much. I mean, how can you be ahead of a game that is constantly changing and have the same things apply, because the game is played differently almost patch to patch based on what's strong. Like, sure, like somebody can be ahead in one patch, the next patch could be a fucking reset. Like, suddenly when you go to MSI, it doesn't matter if you're ahead playing Udyr and Hecarim, one of those champions is viable. It's also bannable. You have Rumble, Morgana are arguably stronger, and then the entire meta around like AD carries had a lot of things that could be explored. Like Seraphine was nerfed out of the game. Now you have Lulu becoming really strong. What can you pair with Lulu? Jinx got nerfed. She was super strong before. There's so many different things that happen that it's really just about understanding, like mastering a patch rather than mastering the game as a whole. Like I feel like you just have to understand general concepts and then hone in on what is actually good and master it inside the patch that you're playing on, which is why like the best players and like the people that win have this mentality of like, I don't need to be the best at the beginning in week one. It's about being the best when it matters on the patch that we're going to be playing all the games on. When you're talking about Vitality, I wanted to definitely ask about this player because, I mean, we've seen him get fucked so many times that it's almost comical at this point. Which is,
this is going, it's obvious.
Which is obviously Gilius, right? Like Gilius was on your team. He ended up getting benched for Kiki's, and then recently, I mean, he seemed to do really well in this last season with Schalke. Had a good series against you in quarters. I think went to 5 games with G2.
Yep.
So like, I mean, he had a really good season, and then he immediately gets benched for Correa. What is it about Gilius that keeps on putting him in these situations where people just seemingly always think there's an upgrade to him?
I think, the greatest strength of Gilius is, his sheer force of confidence. It is infectious, and that was very important for us in Vitality. In the beginning, he brought the attitude like, we were fucking a group of barbarians going raiding, we were like, we were in it, we were going to war together, that energy that he brings along with you is like, we're going to fucking win, doesn't matter who the fuck that is, and that attitude is very good for a team to have. Like that miracle run that they fucking did wouldn't fucking happen if it wasn't for fucking Gilius, because he has that fucking attitude. He's very charismatic in the way he carries himself in a team. But the issue that we ran into, and this is a long time ago, of course, people change. Like I've changed since then, like I would handle the situation different. This was fucking 2018. The issue that we ran into was often, we ran into a lot of walls in terms of how we wanted to approach the game. I think often the team reached a conclusion of what was the reason as to why we lost, and he reached a different one. And I think this is something that created kind of a rift between the team. One player wants to move in one direction, and the rest of the team wants to move in the other direction. And that created a lot of unnecessary clashes. And this is, of course, a long time ago. I know that people grow. And this is something that I knew in the context of my players that we would require a shift. And that's why we brought in kha'zix, because we just needed a shift where we have 5 players that agree on how we wanted to approach the game and how we wanted to improve within the parameters that we've set. And that was just the natural change for us. We hit those walls, and we tried to find ways around those walls, but we just couldn't figure them out. And I can't speak to at all what happened in Schalke for Gilius and so forth. I agree that in spring he played really, really well. I think he really found himself, and I think it's impeccable that the player is managing to, no matter what is fucking thrown at him, that he just fucking keeps going at it, keeps fucking grinding hard. I think that's very, very respectable, and I think his attitude and his character is definitely like one of a kind that I will probably never see again in my lifetime, because he's just so unique as a person. But with that also comes an element of ego, right? An element of ego is like, this is the way I want to do things. This is how I want to drive the game. And that can also come with some issues in itself. But I think just his energy, like that energy, I try to replicate that energy within the teams that I work with, because it just worked so well. Like we are so fucking confident we're gonna win LEC no matter fucking what. We lost this game, I don't fucking give a fuck. We're gonna win everything. We lost the scrim, I don't care. We're gonna fucking win worlds. And I think with the boys, Jack Troll, Attila, and Jiizuke, like they worked with him for some time, so they picked some of that up. That fucking level of confidence coming into the matches. We play against Fnatic, the fucking dangerous Fnatic of 2018. We didn't care. We came with plan. We ganged the shit out of Caps. the game goes to 60 minutes, we lose anyway. We're like, fuck it, we'll get them next time. And that attitude was very positive to have.
Yeah, Jack Troll was so confident he thought he could even play in season 10.
Yeah.
No, listen, it's near the end of the episode. Just let that one go. Just let it go quietly, you know.
Oh man. You know what I mean? I'll take it. I still flame Jack Troll daily for that Tom Kench steal on the
That was
carcass.
hilarious. Dude, your reaction to it, I was crying laughing. That was too
Oh,
good.
it just hurts me emotionally. I mean, I'm a Carthus player, right? And
when he did that like flash or whatever. Oh,
yeah,
it was so good.
next level. It was next level. Jesus Christ. I'm so tilted. Like, Jesus, like this is where we end the episode, isn't it? Like this is just
the PTSD is just replayed in your mind.
Well, I mean, I think we talked about most things that were the hot topics regarding Fnatic and LEC for summer. So I mean, this is normally where we open it up. If there's any topic that you didn't get to talk about that you wanted to hit on this show, we can definitely do it. If not, we can just close it out here.
No, I just would like to say that I'm very excited. You know, I like the element of risk. I like the element of doubt that is in the community of what the project is. But I think there's a world if we do things right that, you know, the LEC is right for the taking. You know, spring was shaky as fuck, and that was, you know, opportunity for everyone to really step in and get things done. And I imagine also that G2 is going to level it up. And I'm just excited for the competition because, you know, I look at Rogue, look at Mad Lions, look at G2. These are games to be like excited for. So whatever comes our way, you know, I feel like the team atmosphere, we've managed to put it in a really, really good place already. And the practice, I couldn't have, you know, hoped for more. So I'm just super excited, and I'm hoping that in the future when I come back that we'll be able to talk about how we did it and how we found success. That's my dream now.
Awesome. I mean, I guess the last thing we can throw at you is who do you think are going to be the 3 teams from LEC to make it to Worlds 2021?
I think us, Mad Lions, and G2.
Rogue not making it. Damn. Okay.
The thing is, you know, you have to move one out, right? And Rogue have a lot of qualities that make them fucking good. You know, they have individual players that are fucking strong. I think Hansama, Trimby, Inspired fucking played really fucking well in spring. And I think it's just a question of just that. You know, it's like they are very precise in their play. They are very good in their play. They are very good at winning best of rounds and grinding them out during the spring split. But there's always this element when it comes to those best of fives when things get very chaotic and you get shit thrown at you and you get into situations that you've never been pushed in before. You get to see like a different side of that team. And I think spring split was probably the best opportunity to make you know, that precise play work. I think with how the jungle was and how inherently good it was to always full clear before these changes that have occurred with 15 seconds, I think that adds an element of, you know, craziness to the game that you know, that will help a team like us and G2 because we strive in that chaos. Like the previous year in LEC, it was always Fnatic and G2 battling out because they always pushed teams to, like they pushed them to the dark zone. They're like, what the fuck are we doing here? We're in G2's dark zone. And we're getting dizzy with the amount of shit they're throwing at us. They're inting, but somehow they're still winning, you know? And that dark zone, you couldn't really apply it in spring. Like the Rogue and Mad Lions had very good patterns of winning out games, and this caught G2 and us very, very, like, it caught us. We got knocked out cold. And I think in summer, there will be an element of change with the jungle changes. And I think as the teams ramp up, the teams that try to play with a higher level of activity in the long run will become better. But Rogue, maybe they realize this, right? Maybe there's an element that's like, yo, we went to the World Championship, we tried to play the same way, it didn't fucking work. We lost to you know, we were last in the group. We got fucking knocked out by Mad Lions. Maybe there's something that they learned there. So I don't want to like count them out of the race, not at all, because they are going to be a dangerous opponent.
I'm with you though, mate. They definitely have like a fragility to them that the other
they have like
teams
this choking mentality that you can like smell.
In English, that's like the perfect way to say it. And people who know football will know this saying, which is like in English, you say like their problem is when it gets to squeaky bomb time, because it's like basically when people are in like a tight competition, they're all scared, their arsehole goes out, and then they might shit themselves when they're like, that's the problem with that team when it gets to squeaky bomb time. That's when the problems occur for Rogue. There you go. There's a gift from British culture from you.
There you go. So we'll have to see how Rogue fares in the squeaky bum time of LEC. Thank you for being here, Yamato. It was a good time, man.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Always
best
a
of
pleasure.
luck. We'll do it again sometime.
Thank you.
See ya.